A climate crisis is looming over us and Mother Nature is in danger. This has caused a worldwide push to minimize greenhouse gas emissions. Many countries have chosen to set goals for these reductions. For example, the United States and Japan both plan to achieve net zero emissions by the year 2050. To fulfill these goals, they have begun trying to limit the use of fossil fuels. Nuclear energy seems like a great sustainable alternative to the use of fossil fuels for energy production because of its reliability, low operating cost, and lack of carbon emissions. But is this really a good source of energy to invest in? My name is Elise, and today I want to tackle that question by considering the perspective of those who live near nuclear power plants, in particular through the documentary films of Hitomi Kamanaka. Nuclear energy has shown to have many risks of danger in Japan specifically. To start, this energy production method creates radioactive waste that must be stored. Some places in Japan have chosen to recycle or reprocess some of this waste, but that can also allow radioactive substances to emit into the environment. Also, Japan is a country that is vulnerable to natural disasters. On March 11th of 2011, an earthquake triggered a tsunami that breached the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, causing a radioactive leakage that affected many people. First, let's look at the Japanese government's stance on nuclear energy. Throughout the last 50 years, the Japanese government has invested a lot of money and resources into nuclear power plants in order to rely less on fossil fuels and be able to produce more of their own energy. In Japan Goes Nuclear, an article in the May 4, 1965 issue of The Times, a London-based daily newspaper, it was announced to the world that the first Japanese nuclear power plant began operating. The Tokai nuclear power plant in Ibaraki Prefecture was created to help sustain the power needs of Japan's capital city, Tokyo. Since then, nuclear energy provides 1/3 of Japan's electricity, but they haven't fully gotten rid of fossil fuels either. In Power Plans, an article in the July 19, 1986 issue of The Times, Japanese officials announced their intention of doubling the country's nuclear energy output by the year 2030. This announcement was made despite the Chernobyl nuclear accident in Ukraine occurring only months before. It seems like the Japanese government was confident in their nuclear energy and didn't think a devastating nuclear accident could happen to them. But Japan is a group of islands that lies on geographic fault lines, which makes it fundamentally pretty unstable, and natural disasters often occur. What does Japan do with the radioactive waste produced at nuclear power plants? Often, it is stored in spent fuel pools or in dry cask storage systems, which are large steel cylinders that can be welded shut. But Japan has also been trying to implement nuclear waste reprocessing facilities as a way to recycle this waste or have some other purpose for it. These facilities are designed to take waste that must be stored, separate out plutonium and uranium, and create a new mixed oxide fuel that can be used in thermal reactors to produce more energy. Hitomi Kamanaka is an award-winning Japanese filmmaker and documentarian that graduated from Waseda University in 1984. She is passionate about sustainability and teaching people about nuclear radiation. With this passion, Kamanaka has produced a series of documentaries highlighting commonly untold stories related to nuclear power and radiation. To teach people about nuclear reprocessing, Kamanaka traveled to northern Japan to Rokkasho village, where construction is underway for the first reprocessing plant in Japan. Kamanaka shares the community's opinions in her documentary titled Rokkasho Rhapsody, released in 2006. Nuclear reprocessing is something the United States has chosen not to pursue at this time, But several countries in Europe have done this before Japan started. So Kamanaka shares important perspectives from a community in England that has already encountered the effects of nuclear reprocessing. In England, the Sellafield nuclear reprocessing facility had been running for several years. Health tests of the community near the reprocessing facility show leukemia in young children was 10 times the international average. Janine Alice Smith, a Cumbria, England local, describes the trend of leukemia in children.
Most of them had a father who worked at the plant, so there was this association of fathers working at the plant and children with leukemia. And as long as things are okay, they're happy to support the plant. But as soon as they get ill or a cancer that could be sort of associated with radiation, the doubts will start. And it's the same with workers at the plant.
So there's this trend of supporting nuclear reprocessing until someone gets sick, then more people start opposing it. Back in Rokkasho village, this could explain why the majority of the community supports nuclear reprocessing. The construction of the facility has provided many jobs, and it will decrease the amount of nuclear waste that must be stored and make a large profit for them in the future. All of these things make nuclear reprocessing seem like a great idea. However, some residents are knowledgeable about the risks associated with nuclear reprocessing and try to spread the word. Keiko Kikukawa is an active protester and farmer in Rokkasho village. She has a love for nature and wants to protect it. Kikukawa says, "I grew up in this landscape, so this is my starting place. It's my home. I don't want it to be another Chernobyl, a place children can't come back to." And that is why she feels called to protect her land and community. Kikukawa also says, "I've come to understand that radioactive contamination is much worse than war. The pollution is on a world scale and will last a long time." There is a lot of concern about radioactive emissions in Rokkasho village causing sickness throughout their community. Also, the reprocessing plant owners claim that this plant could safely withstand a 6.9 magnitude earthquake. But is this really a good statement to make people feel safer? Maybe at first glance, but definitely not after the 8.9 magnitude earthquake that happened on March 11th of 2011. This 8.9 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Japan, which caused a large tsunami to form that hit northeastern Japan about 30 minutes later. Near the coast in northeastern Japan was the Fukushima power plant. According to the World Nuclear Association, the 15-meter tsunami disabled the power supply and cooling of 3 Fukushima Daiichi reactors. All 3 cores largely melted in the first 3 days. 19,500 people were killed by the earthquake or tsunami. Since then, there have been 2,313 disaster-related deaths among evacuees from Fukushima Prefecture. Filmmaker Hitomi Kamanaka traveled to Fukushima after the disaster in 2011 and directed a documentary titled Little Voices from Fukushima. This documentary is centered around a small community of mothers that are trapped in Fukushima, where they are surrounded by radiation and have to raise their kids to the best of their ability. Kamanaka shows the stories behind why these women have to stay in Fukushima, where they are exposed to radiation. One mother, Miyuki Watanabe, explains, "One family was able to take their kids outside of Fukushima, but we have no family outside. My husband couldn't take any days off, so we just stayed in Nihonmatsu." That mother said it was worth taking the kids away from Fukushima, but we couldn't leave. It was like watching the kids get lined up in the order they'd be getting sick. I felt so sad. Another mother, named Fumiyo Endo, expresses, "There's also a problem with our family getting separated. It hurts when people ask, 'Why don't you just evacuate?' I want people to understand that we can't just pick up and leave." Later in the film, this same mother, Fumiyo Endo, finds out that her son has several 1 millimeter cysts in his neck. This is heartbreaking news for her because it is caused by radioactive exposure and there's nothing she can do to stop it. Another issue that Kamanaka highlights is the troubled relationship between parents. Often, it seems like the fathers go to work all day and don't see their children's health declining as much. Chiharu Haruna's mother said, "I told my kids about the friction between their dad and me. Things aren't great at the moment," I said. "You might worry about our relationship, but what I am doing is to try to protect both dad and you children. I'm doing it for your health and so we can all live a happier life." I was able to ask her to trust me with what I'm doing. I'll do anything so that my children can stay healthy and happy. Nothing can stop me from giving them a better future. This mother is inspiring, but as you can imagine, she is in a really difficult position. These parents go above and beyond trying to make the world as safe as possible for their children, but they continue to worry as they see their children's health decline anyway. And the rest of Japan is not very aware of what life is like for them. Nuclear energy is often praised for a variety of benefits like its high profitability, reliability, and low operating costs. It stimulates the economy by giving many people jobs and allowing Japan to import fewer energy resources. Also, nuclear power can drive us away from fossil fuels, which are polluting our world. These benefits are real, I will not deny that, and many people work at nuclear power plants just because they need to make a living, or they may even be misinformed about the severity of radiation exposure. But nuclear power has already caused many people to suffer. Radioactive waste from nuclear power plants is even more toxic than greenhouse gases and lasts much longer. The problem is that the effects are often invisible and these issues develop over time. Japanese culture has even been impacted. This is because Japanese people greatly respect the land that sustains them and gives their country pride. But when this land becomes toxic, people have to lose trust and become disconnected from the land they used to identify with and love. As the Japanese government and many governments around the world praise nuclear energy for its lack of carbon emissions, it is important to show the scary reality of the dangers associated with nuclear power plants. Like Hitomi Kamanaka, we need to spread the word and encourage our leaders to make smart, well-informed decisions during this time of a worldwide crisis. What do you think? Would you want a nuclear power facility in your backyard? Chances are there is one not too far away from where you are right now. Thank you for listening.